And the Ring of Power has a will of its own. It abandoned Gollum. But something happened then the ring did not intend.
Isildur's bane is found. Isildur's bane.
The ring's got a mind of its own. In fact, it kind of has a voice of its own. That's what you heard much of the time through these clips. In that, when there's that whispering, going on, right? You can hear that in the background. And then not only that, you hear Galadriel in the prologue talk about how the ring has a will of its own. It did not expect something. So is this lore friendly? Is this what Tolkien intended? Well, I have 4 quotes to read from you, and I think Michael might have even more, unless we're overlapping here. We haven't talked about it, so we're going to find out. The first comes from the Fellowship of the Ring, from the chapter The Shadow of the Past, where Tolkien writes, or this is Gandalf speaking to Frodo: "A ring of power looks after itself, Frodo. It may slip off treacherously, but its keeper never abandons it. It was not Gollum, Frodo, but the ring itself that decided things. The ring left him," which right there, right? It had a will of its own. It's something did not expect that, Galadriel says in the prologue there. And then here's another quote from the Silmarillion of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. "And Saruman deemed that the ring, which was Sauron's, would seek for its master as he became manifest once more, but if he were driven out again, then it would lie hid." So he's saying that the ring would seek for its master. And then in Unfinished Tales, in The Disaster of the Gladden Fields, which talks about how Isildur lost the ring and was killed, and how was it the Ring of Bear here? I can't remember how. There was one like squire, one page that survived all that. Anyway, that's The Disaster of the Gladden Fields in the Unfinished Tales. He writes this: "So passed the first victim of the malice of the masterless ring, Isildur, second king of all the Dunedain, lord of Arnor and Gondor, and in that age of the world, the last." So the malice, right? Malice is a personality trait. And then lastly, this is also from that same chapter in Unfinished Tales, The Disaster of the Gladden Fields. "Yet many have thought that the ferocity and determination of their assault on Isildur was in part due to the ring. It was little more than 2 years since it had left his hand, and though it was swiftly cooling, it was still heavy with his evil, and seeking all means to return to its lord, as it did again when he recovered and was rehoused." So all those quotes seem to point to the fact that the ring has some sort of will or intention, but is it as much of a character as Jackson makes it in the Fellowship of the Ring? That's the question, because can the ring have its own personality? Can it have a voice? Can it speak to us? Can it have the ability to influence people, or is it just Sauron's will through the ring? Maybe. Michael, what do you think?
The only we did overlap in one quote. I'll just read the other one, which is also that I have, which is supporting those ones that you brought up, but it actually uses the word will, and this is in the Silmarillion, also of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. "And much of the strength and will of Sauron passed into that one ring. For the power of the elven rings was very great, and that which should govern them must be a thing of surpassing potency." So it actually says that Sauron's will is passing into the ring. That means the ring has a will, not just power. So there is a will. Now, obviously, it's not the same kind of will as Sauron himself has. I mean, there are so many places where the ring, if it actually had a will, could have revealed. It's like Frodo and Sam. Like, I'm thinking of in Mordor, they're dressing up as orcs, as small goblins, in the long line, and the ring could have done something. Like, it's in Mordor. Here it is. Like, this has been its whole purpose.
Yeah.
Wants to get back to its master, and this is the perfect time to betray them. There's plenty of other places like that where if the ring was like looking around, like it was a person looking around it and going like, "What should I do now?" And then acting on it, it would have done many more things than it did. So it does seem to have a will, kind of a passive will, almost like a magnetic will, where it's trying to get back to Sauron. But there is a will there, and the question for me becomes all the whispering. like it actually has a voice in the
exactly.
movie, and that's what we never see. So we never see a voice in Tolkien from The Ring. At least I don't think so. We never hear any whispering. So obviously, you're in cinema. Obviously, I think the Jackson team felt like it needed to emphasize the pull of The Ring, and The Ring does have pull. It says so explicitly with Boromir, for example, and you know, that it's not just temptation, but there's an actual draw. Obviously, we see it in spades with Gollum. We see it with Bilbo and the difficulty in letting go of the ring, or even knowing that he's not letting it up, giving it up back in Hobbiton. So, but does it have a voice? No, it does not. There's no time that I've found there where it actually could say anything and whisper to anyone. But maybe I missed something. So those are my thoughts before we answer the questions.
What about you, John? How did you take it?
The letter. So the whole question of the voice. I was researching this one before we recorded on Tolkien Gateway, and just reading about the ring and its, because there's so much. I feel like there's so much ambiguity about what this question within it. Like, is it just like Sauron in there? Like, you putting himself in there, or does it become its own thing? I mean, the ring is such a fascinating sort of thing that encompasses all of these big questions about what power actually is and how we make our will more quickly more efficient, more effective. It's so applicable to the modern age with all of our technology. It's like we just have rings all over the place, and we're just doing all these things. But it's almost like the ring at times is like what we're starting to do with AI and these kinds of things.
Man, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. Same thing, man. I was going to say, it's like the ring is the AI for Morgoth.
Yeah.
Sauron.
For Sauron. I mean, well, and I mean, he does, like, it's like, I know with Morgoth, he told one of the volumes of the History of Middle Earth is called Morgoth's Ring, because Tolkien made the point at one point that, like, the whole world was Morgoth's ring, right? Like he sought to make it this tool of domination for himself. And Morgoth became weaker and weaker as he poured his creative, life force into other things of his making. His power became, like, personally, his power became dispersed, and they were like extensions of him. I'm kind of just like throwing all these ideas out there because I don't know that I have a settled mind on this. But
you're in good company, because Tolkien didn't have a settled mind either.
Yeah.
The one quote I did find from the letters was from letter 211 about this, and he says, "You cannot press the One Ring too hard, for it is, of course, a mythical feature, even though the world of the tales is conceived in more or less historical terms." So he's just, even he himself isn't really coming down really particularly about what kind of will or sentience or whatever the ring has. So all we can kind of go off of is his hints. The one core thing that I would point to that's very different between the books and the movie is the voice. There's never a voice described in the books, even though there's plenty of other things. The ring does in fact leave people. So the whole funny bouncing ring down the rock. Funny looking in one sense, but it's like, because it's like, what is it expecting? Like, it's got little legs, it's gonna jump, keep bouncing down forever. But it did in fact, Gandalf even says it left for Bilbo, or left Gollum rather.
And let me riff off what you said with John with AI and the ring. This is what struck me in thinking about this, is the ring is simply reflecting back or spitting back the input that it has. What is the input that it had, or the data that it had? It's Sauron's will and malice, right? He poured all that into the ring. So what is the ring going to have? It's going to have his will and his malice, because Sauron can't create. He can't create a life. There's no life in the ring. I think that's pretty well established. There's no way that he could create something new that has a will of its own. So somehow it has to be Sauron's will. Now, we can talk about the whole idea of the cinema thing. Let's get into that later. But I think the whole idea that it's like AI, right? It only is going to spit back. It's only going to talk back to you what you've put into it. And so if you give it a bunch of crap, if you give it a bunch of Sauron's ideas of what is what is the good and right thing to do, then it's only going to spit back the whole thing.
So are you suggesting, Jonathan, that we should change the URL of the OneRing.com to be MordorAI.com?
That's right. Either that or exploring Tolkien. Either way, I will. All right. So let's look at it. Let's figure out. Let's dive into, is it lore friendly? And I think this hinges on the fact of what we think about the voice, because I will say that the way it's portrayed is lore friendly all across the board, except for the voice, maybe. But here's the thing: is I don't think you can portray it as having a will of its own if it's just a completely inanimate object. When Tolkien writes about the ring, he can tell us what it is. He can explain to us that it has a will, that it has mouths. But how do you portray that in the film as part of the evil that's trying to be overcome? Well, if it's just an inanimate ring that doesn't really do anything other than, make you go into the Middle Earth upside down, it's hard to lend it that evil credibility, that evil authority. So I would say right now, yes, it is lore friendly the way it was portrayed in Peter Jackson's films. John, I'm going to go to you. Where do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes, because I just think there's enough ambiguity. I with the voice, I get that objection. I think I'm gonna save my comments on that until we get to the next questions.
All right.
Well, I was going to say no because of the technicality of the voice. However, Jonathan has changed my mind in his last argument about AI.
Once in 70 episodes.
Because here's what AI can do. AI can mimic back things that it's put into it. So the voice doesn't have to be the voice of a sentient mind. It can be like the recording of Sauron's will. Essentially, it's like an imprint of Sauron's will, and it just manifests itself. And Tolkien never says there's no voice, so who knows what how it tempts people. So because of that, and because I was originally connecting the idea of voice with actually having a kind of sentience in order to speak, nevertheless, I think Mordor AI can do that kind of thing. It could have recordings of Sauron's speaking corrupting words and tempting people. I think there can in fact be a way in which that's the way the ring reaches out around itself without actually having sentience. So I'm going to go with yes.
Okay, guys, I might have to buy MordorAI.com and create a chat GPT.
I bet you $100 it's already bought.
No, it's not. I'm buying it right now, and thankfully we're not live streaming this. So, hold on. Let me log into my account. No, I seriously have it up. I'm going to buy Mordor AI.
Excellent. All right.
Okay. Next question.
I want naming credibility.
Okay. All right. I'll give you all the money that site ever makes.
Never. Not.
Does the change make for better cinema? Well, I kicked us off last time. I'm going to say actually yes. I think it does. Because like I said earlier, the inanimate ring is really hard to make, to give it evil authority, to make it something that is feared. And so having the voice, just that voice in the background, it's almost like it's a reflection of Sauron's voice, of Gandalf's voice too, when he speaks the ring poem in the Orcish language. Yeah. So yeah. The inscription, Black speech. Thank you. I feel like it had to have that in order to make it what it needed to be in order to have that ominous feeling. Anyway, all right.
I'm going to throw yes in there. No additional comments. You said all the same reasons. Okay. It needs to be that. It needs to be something cinematic, and I think it's defensible.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think what I wanted to say about the voices, in addition to everything you all have said, is I don't think there would be a better way to portray that effect, that aspect of the rings power, that it has this it somehow, I mean, we all know the experience of something speaking to you without words, right? Without actual audible words. So how are you going to portray that in a film?
Yeah, it's sort of like the feeling of somebody looking like you, following you in the dark. You can't see anything, but you've got this feeling. How do you portray that on film? Like
and I
a little bit of that.
found this on Tolkien Gateway, which I thought was and I tried to. So it references letter 246. I couldn't find the exact reference in the letter, but it says part of its essential deceit was filling minds with imaginations of supreme power, and so I'm like, how do you portray? And so that's funny to me that it's part of its essential deceit, because it almost makes me think of like Sauron creates this thing and it's supposed to like tell him how great he is all the time. It's supposed to be like, oh, Sauron, you're so handsome and wonderful. Like,
That's right.
And then whoever else has it, it's like Gandalf, you could be the greatest, right? Why don't you just
Well, we see that directly, right? When Sam puts it on, he has the vision of himself striding across the land and turning everything into a garden.
Yeah.
And it's Sam's idea of ultimate power is like a garden, which is awesome.
but it's like feeding that. So how do you portray that in a film?
There's got to be sound.
And that voice of temptation, right? That voice of like, how do you do that? But
right.
All right. So John, does it make for better cinema then?
Yes.
Oh, oops.
Yes.
Oh wait, sorry, I just asked that. How much do you like the change then? The change being the voice, really, ultimately, is what we're talking about.
Like, the change being the voice. I'm pretty good with it. I'll give it a 5. Yeah, I'll give it a 5. I mean, I think I can't think of a better way of doing it. Quite. I even like the touch of like it's whispering in this like weird sort of, like almost like hypnotic sort of like whisper. And it's some other language. It's like, what is it saying? So it's like it's speaking some kind of deeper personal language to whoever is there, and it's like has this hypnotic effect on it.
That's a great point. You should also buy Mordor ASMR, Jonathan.
All right, the site doesn't make that much money to actually justify all these domains. I did buy Mordor AI. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it by the time this episode is released, but we'll see.
All right, I like the change a lot. I think it really does a good job of explaining what I do think is a kind of primitive will and primitive intellect. So I'm going to say, in this case, I'm going to say 4.5.
4.5. Man, you guys are really like scraping.
I really like the change. I like the change.
Yeah, I do too. I'm trying to think how many other changes will I like better than this, because I have to find what my extremes are before I figure out what like.
Jonathan, there are hundreds of changes.
I know, but I got to think about it for just a split second here. Hold on. Are there changes I like better than this? Yes. Okay, I can think of one. So this is. But I think I'm closer to John. So I'm going to say a 4.7. I feel like
you're trying to push your average.
Yeah, I feel like this change worked really well. I don't think it was done in an over the top. It didn't like you said, we didn't see little legs sprout up and have it run away from Bilbo in the Gollum's cave. So I think it worked really well. I like the change, and I think even though that there is like they give it this voice, they anthropomorphize it even more than Tolkien did. So that is a change. But I think it worked well for the films, and I think they had to because there was no creation of that ring of malice through the words of Tolkien in our head.
All right, you've convinced me for a second time. Changed mine to 4.8. It's hard for me to think of a better change.
I was going to be so proud about how I was higher than you on this one, and yet you had to. All right, I'm going to be a 4.81.
Playing games now.
All right, wow, guys, we're high. That's crazy. I'm impressed.
Change number 19, our favorite change.
Our favorite change. I didn't think that this ring, this ring being given a character of its own in a way would be so high, but I don't think they could have done it any other way, and I think the change was necessary, and I think it worked out really well. I think it lent the ring what it needed to have, and it made it into a character that needed to be destroyed. Right? It wasn't it wasn't just quantum entangled with Sauron and it was just sitting there. So it was actually like,
and Sauron not really making like visible appearances in this film, which is obviously a visible medium other than in the prologue.
What do you mean?
Kind of
need a big giant.
You need that it to have a stronger character.
There was the laundry line eye between the towers of Barad-dûr.
I mean, there is that. Yeah.
The burning laundry line.
Yeah.